there was a certain man in Russia long ago. He was big and strong and his eyes a flaming glow. And then they put a bullet between his eyes. Welcome to the story of Grigory Rasputin. Rasputin was born into a family of peasants in Siberia in January of 1869. In terms of his childhood, we know basically nothing because no one was really documenting the day-to-day life of an ugly peasant child in Siberia. But contextually, from the time period and the region, we can assume he was not well educated, and if I was a betting woman, I would bet he was probably illiterate well into his adulthood. So his early life is kind of a dark cloud mystery, but we do know that sometime in 1886, Grigory Rasputin traveled to Abalak, where he had a courtship and eventual marriage with Paskova Dubrovina. And the couple reportedly had 7 children together, 3 of which made it to adulthood, including his daughter Maria, who grew up to be a lion tamer and died in Los Angeles, California in the 1970s. Which has absolutely nothing to do with this story. It's just a fun Rasputin fact for you to throw out at a party. And Rasputin definitely isn't remembered as a great father or anything. In fact, he ditched his family pretty early on when he set out to embark on his spiritual side quests. And Rasputin's wife, who's at home, the one who just had a baby and is pregnant with the other one, yeah, fuck her. Leave her at home. We've got holy sights to see. So he goes off on these quests doing God knows what with God knows who. And he would return home to his wife looking busted as ever, and his behavior and his mannerisms seemed to have changed dramatically when he would come back from these pilgrimages. He became incredibly devout to his faith. He started singing weird prayer songs, and he was swearing off alcohol and meat. And this is just his thing now. Like, no skills, just wandering around to these different holy sites and collecting followers to listen to his new enlightened thoughts. He started holding worship in his cellar, and the local priests were like, hold the fuck up. What is going on over there? Because the local priests are hearing some weird shit about this, like women washing Rasputin and singing creepy little songs with him. This part always kind of reminds me of the Manson family, just creepy and ugly with weird sexual undertones all over the place. And as horrifying as Rasputin looked, he obviously had riz, because he had a pretty significant rise to fame. In the early 1900s, he traveled to the city of Kazan, where he earned himself the reputation of a healer of sorts. People went to Rasputin with their crises of faith, and he would give them guidance. Some time had passed and his reputation was still a bit shoddy, but it was here that he started earning praise of local religious leaders, and it was arranged for Rasputin to travel to St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, he started rubbing elbows with the higher society, and he's really racking up the followers now. Because remember, rich people at their core are losers, so of course the high society is bored with their little planned out lives, and the idea of a magic, alternative spirituality, and the occult really gets their engines revving. So Rasputin's freaky ass teachings are fitting right in. He meets Anastasia of Montenegro, and that is who introduces him to the Russian imperial family. When Nicholas Romanov, the Tsar of Russia, and his wife met Rasputin in November of 1905, the meeting was brief, but Nicholas did note in his journal the meeting of the mystic. Afterwards, Rasputin returned home, and although he would not cross paths with the royal couple, he did send them a few telegrams until they met again in July of 1906, where Rasputin would also meet the couple's children. And it's somewhere in this shuffle that Alexandra and Nicholas start to believe that Rasputin is a magical holy man who can provide miracle healings, and start having him treat their ill, frail little son, Alexei, who was suffering with a very unknown, mysterious illness that we now know is hemophilia B, a disorder that prevents blood clotting and can cause extreme bleeding and even death. Nicholas's wife, Alexandra the Tsarina in particular, really believed that she had seen Rasputin heal her son and ease his pain. And one thing about a mother, they do not want to see their child sick. So if there's something that will ease Alexei's pain, Alexandra will go to the end of the earth to preserve it. Even if the thing bringing comfort is the creepiest man I've ever seen. In 1907, when Alexei had internal hemorrhaging, Rasputin was called to treat the boy, who went on to make a pretty remarkable recovery the next day, which of course further solidified the magic powers in Alexandra's mind. It is super unclear how often Rasputin treated the boy, but one of the more notable times it happened in 1912 was when a bumpy carriage ride ripped open Alexei's blood vessels and caused significant hematomas in his upper thigh. This type of internal hemorrhaging was dire. The little Tsarevich was in agony. He was delirious with a fever and his little body was giving up. The desperate Alexandra reached out to Rasputin, and he told her he had actually just spoke to God, and God loves how sad you are about your son. So the kid is gonna be fine. Just tell the doctors to piss off and the kid will be Gucci in a couple days. And I hate to say it, but that worked. The boy recovered, and that confirmed Rasputin must be magic. We all believe that, right? He didn't just know little Alexei, he was introduced to all 5 of the couple's children. He would often send them telegrams, and the children were encouraged to speak to him about their lives, and I guess spirituality? Are children spiritual? That honestly sounds like a horror movie plot. Rasputin had been given the position of lamplighter, which did give him access to a lot of the palace. And the staff around the children got mega pervert vibes from Rasputin, so they asked for him to stop walking into the nursery while the girls were in their nightgowns. But complaining about Rasputin is risky business because the royals might just fire your ass instead. But as the accusations against Rasputin started to stack up from the staff, including lewd conduct and even sexual assault, the Tsar's extended family, including his sister, started to push back hard against this freak Rasputin, writing to Nicholas telling him to remove this man from the lives of his children. Because above all else, Rasputin is incredibly damaging to the reputation of the royal family, and this is an incredibly volatile political climate. So when the pornographic cartoons started circulating of Rasputin doing it with his wife, staff, and even his daughters, Nicholas realized he had no reins on this horse and sent Rasputin away, much to the displeasure of his wife, who truly believed that Rasputin was the main force keeping their son Alexei alive, and his children still considering Rasputin a close family friend. Never mind all the rumors of him taking bribes and sexual favors in the name of God. Forget all the other holy men denouncing him as a heretic or his negative run-ins with your staff, security, and prime minister. Poo-poo all those reports of his excessive drunkenness and sexual assaults on multiple women, or that he is actively tanking your family's reputation and political standing. You gotta call that man a friend. And by the mid-1910s, the Russian public is over Rasputin, with the more extreme religious sects referring to him as the Antichrist. One lady even tried to gut him in the street, plunging a knife into his stomach outside his home in 1914. Sadly, Rasputin recovered, and thankfully his attacker fled the country and was never held responsible. Rasputin's luck would run out, however, in December 1916. The Tsar's cousin, Grand Duke Dmitri, and Prince Felix, the husband of Nicholas's niece, decided enough is enough. They concocted a plan to murder this ugly-ass freak and free Russia from him once and for all. And like everything related to Grigory Rasputin, the story of his death is exaggerated, murky, weird, and generally unclear. We know they shot him in the head for sure, but the rest of the unconfirmed, often disputed story told by Prince Felix is tea, and it goes like this. On a cold night at the end of December, shortly after midnight, Rasputin arrived at the home of Prince Felix, where Rasputin was served tea and cakes that were laced with cyanide. And despite him overindulging on poisoned wine and cakes, Prince Felix watched as Rasputin seemed totally fine and unaffected by the poison. And after a couple hours, the prince is really confused why the poison is not working against the evil forces of Rasputin. So Prince Felix excuses himself and returns upstairs where Grand Duke Dmitri is waiting for the update. The pissed off prince took Dmitri's gun and returned to face Rasputin. He shot Rasputin in the chest. The prince and his accomplices then took Rasputin's coat and jacket and wore them back to Rasputin's apartment to make it seem to any nosy neighbors that he had returned home that night. And the plan is going great so far, but when they returned back to deal with Rasputin's body, he jumped up. Rasputin's undead corpse attacked the men, and a chase ensued into the courtyard where Rasputin was shot in the head and collapsed into the snow. And the men promptly threw his body into the river. The story of a scandalous murder during a party in the royal palace spread like wildfire, and Rasputin's body was fished out of the frozen river days later. The autopsy report disappeared, but the surgeon who did the autopsy didn't exactly agree with the story Prince Felix had given, and said instead that the body had been severely beaten and had 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was at close range in the forehead. And there you have it, the story of rah-rah Rasputin, the lover of the Russian queen. If you like this story, make sure you leave me a comment so the app brings you back, because I've been reading your comments and we still gotta talk about those Romanov kids. And I'll see you in the next one.